Yes, let's continue. This is the first actual lecture in this course. As I said, we will do retrospectives in the start of each seminar, and then we'll do 1 or 2 topics, like lectures on 1 or 2 topics after that in each seminar. So this is the topic for this seminar. We'll look at traditional software development models. We'll look at the Agile Scrum model and the Adaptive Scrum model. Project organization and roles, artifacts, meetings. Jira as a tool for project management, and Confluence as a project wiki. And development environment, yes. Traditional software development models. Have you learned anything about software development models in any other course that you have had? Yeah, some of you. Right. The main thing of the traditional development models, or this is quite this is used still in large development environments, on large projects, and so on and so on. But it's more and more phased out. This is the waterfall model. So what you do in the start of a waterfall model project is that you do a lot of design up front, we say. And that means that you specify the requirements and maybe design the system architecture, you design the data model, you design the user interfaces, the information flow, and so on and so on. So there are a lot of work up front. Based on this design, then the assumption is that by design you have done everything right from the startup. You see? So based on this design, you do some implementation. You implement the system, and you implement the user interface, and you implement different middleware that you need, and so on and so on. And then after the implementation, there's a verification process. That means verify that the system is delivered as the requirements said it should be delivered. And then you have a maintenance phase where you put the system into production, and it lives in a production environment, and you have to do some patches and support and so on the production set system. So this is a traditional way of thinking software development. After that, these methodologies and processes evolved into what you can. One of the schemes were the spiral model, for example. This is also a standardized model for doing development work. This text was quite blurry, I see, so I'll repeat it to you. This is a risk-driven model where development is broken into smaller cycles. So now we're thinking about more or less iterations, you see? You have a spiral process that goes, and you repeat a lot of things in these iterations. You repeat a lot of steps. First of all, in the smallest cycle here, we do a risk analysis, maybe a prototype in the very beginning. Then a concept of operation and a requirements plan, life cycle plan, and then you do a risk analysis, another prototype. You adjust your software requirements and maybe specify something new, and you have a development plan, and then a risk analysis, and then you develop a prototype, and so on and so on. You see that you have a spiral here. So this is more risk-driven, as said. You have more milestones where you measure the risk of the project than you have in a traditional software waterfall model. Okay, moving on from the spiral model, we are starting to talk about more flexible models like RUP, the rational unified process. The rational unified process is more a software process framework. So there are some stages of a process that are defined in the rational unified process, like inception, where you establish the business case for the system. You have the elaboration phase, where problem domain exploration, you have system architecture, so you model some information flow, you model your system components, you model your database. And you have maybe project plan development and risk analysis. You have the construction phase, where you do system design, programming, testing, integration, etc. And a transition phase, where you deploy the system in its operating environment. Here you operate in cycles, so you repeat these steps more than you do in the traditional waterfall model. So where do you go from there? Have you heard about agile methodologies? Anybody want to say what agile methodologies is? By example, for example. By example.
Don't follow seeing things set in stone. You can change your design later when you are doing your programming because something doesn't fit. Something seems different. In the waterfall model, you have to stick to your old design.
Because requirements change. They change every time that you meet with with your client, actually. So try not meeting with your client. That's the best thing. But they change every time. And the agile manifest, and you hear this by the word agile. It means that you're flexible. You're flexible in your software development because of these requirements that are constantly changing. So the Agile Manifest says, we are uncovering better ways of developing software by doing it and helping others to do it. Through this work we have come to value, on the left side, individuals and interactions, working software, customer collaboration, responding to change, value more than on the right side, process and tools, comprehensive documentation, contract negotiation, and following a plan. So, as it says on the last line, that is, while there is value in the items on the right, we value the items on the left more. So it's a process-oriented process, you see. The main thing here is that you want to control the project due to having a good process in developing a software. So you actually reduce your risk by controlling the software process more than you do in a traditional waterfall model, for example. I suppose you have heard about Scrum. I'm going to talk a little bit about it as well. That's one of the agile methodologies. There are others as well. Do you know others?
Extreme programming.
Extreme programming? Yes. Actually, extreme programming came before the Agile Manifest and so on, but it's quite flexible in Agile as well. Kanban, have you heard about that? Yeah. Scrum Ban is a a hybrid between Kanban and Scrum. You also have there are others as well, but Scrum is mainly a framework for agile methodologies. There are a set of rules that you should follow, or you have to follow if you're calling your process Scrum. The main thing is here that you want empirical process control. Projects are divided into sprints, 1 to 3 weeks duration. At the end of sprint, stakeholders and team meet to assess the progress and plan next steps. The project directions can then be adjusted or reoriented based on completed work, not speculation or predictions. The main thing here is that you have iterations. You have sprints in Scrum. So in the start of a sprint, you start by prioritizing your requirements. Maybe you have formalized the requirements in user stories, for example. Then you sit with your product owner as a team, and you discuss what to prioritize for the next 2 weeks if you have 2-week sprints. You see? And then you sit down and work. Maybe you have daily Scrum meetings within your team, so you work through this 2-week sprint. And after the sprint, you have a sprint retrospect, where you look back at what you have done, what you didn't have time to do, and what you what you did good and what you did bad, and so on and so on. And you think, oh, what can we do better for the next sprint? And then you have a meeting again before the next sprint starts with your product owner, with your team. You again, you prioritize your requirements, your user stories, for example, and another 2-week sprint. And these iterations means that you have a lot of meeting points, a lot of people discussing problems, a lot of problems and requirements arise in these meetings, and you constantly, with the process, are controlling the development of your product. So Scrum teams, they are self-organized. The team as a whole is responsible, not a project manager. That means that you have no hierarchy. The product owner or the Scrum Master is not the project manager in traditional sense. The entire team makes the decisions. The entire team is responsible for the decisions and the requirements that are prioritized in a sprint planning meeting. Major roles in a Scrum team: you have a product owner, represents the customer in the team, so you will have product owners in your projects in this course. I will be product owner supposedly in maybe 1 or 2 other projects, and Marius and Simon that was here. Have you met Marius still, some of you? Yes. Will be product owners on the other 2 projects. You have a Scrum Master. The thing with Scrum Master is he's not a project manager, he's a team facilitator. So he administrates everything that needs to be done, maybe plans the meetings, sets up Scrum daily meetings, maybe leads these Scrum daily meetings as well, but nothing more than that. And maybe he actually participates as a developer or designer or something like that in the Scrum team as well. You have teams where somebody shares or have different roles in the same team. Team members, 5 to 9 is considered ideal. We are not, I don't think we are able to do that in this course. We will probably be 4 and 5 persons on every group. Additional roles may be agreed upon within the team. Architect, interaction designer, build master, tester. It depends on what you need in the project. For example, if the requirements say that the UI or the GUI should be awesome, the most perfect GUI that everybody could use without referring to some documentation, you need a designer. If you know that you have a build process, so you probably will have in these projects, you need somebody responsible for the builds. If you want to do testing, you should do, or you are. It's mandatory to write tests and do testing in these projects. So you have to be have the role tester or test responsible or something like that as well. So you will look into these roles when you form the groups and when you have your startup meetings. Okay, Scrum process. You have Scrum meetings. In the start of a sprint planning meeting. Start of sprint 1 in the start of sprint 2. That's sprint 3, not sprint 2. You estimate issues to solve. You prioritize issues to solve. Every day, every working day, in between here, you have daily Scrum meetings. That's also called a...
Daily Scrum.
No. And that was what I said. Stand up. Stand up. Have you heard about that? No. Okay. Stand up. That's a short meeting, like 10 minutes or something, where you talk about what you're going to work on today. And yeah, more or less that's it. You have sprint review meetings, or retrospective, and retrospective, sorry, in the end of each sprint. So you have a lot of meeting points, people talking to people, so that you can communicate on a regular basis, and you can talk about your requirements all the time, and so on and so on. Yes, daily scrums through the whole sprint planning meeting in the start, sprint review meeting in the end, and then a sprint retrospective as well. Typically, sprint review meeting and retrospective often is the same meeting. We will do that in this course. So, how do we formalize our requirements? What we will provide, I think so, we did last year. We will provide you with a start set of user stories, like the requirements that we know in the start of the project. But as we know, requirements may change during the project as well. So there may be new user stories that you edit or that you add to the project, or me as product owner as well maybe adds new user stories as we go along. Have you used user stories? The main thing is that you want to try in one sentence to formalize a requirement and why this requirement is present. And you do that with describing as a and the role of the person using the system. For example, as an administrator, I want to disable users or block users in order to prevent hazardous use of the system. You see? So that's one example. As a and the role, I want to do something in order to. So you have to say why you want to do the thing. We can also use epics. We use that sometimes, not in all projects. It depends on how large the projects are. But epics are large stories that need to be broken down. Maybe we're working on, let's say we have a CMS and we're working on an user administrator module that we use in the CMS. That would be an epic. Or we are working with the build process, that would be an epic, and so on and so on. You classify issues as bugs as well. You know what a bug is, I suppose, and an improvement and an ordinary task. Typically, you break user stories down to tasks and subtasks in Jira. And the severity of the issues, you can classify this in Jira. It could be a blocker, it could be critical, major, minor, and trivial. issue workflow, a Scrum project may agree on a number of states in the issue workflow. So you have an open state, you have an issue that is in progress, in review, in testing, it's done, resolved, or closed. It depends on how you set up your workflow in Jira.
What's the difference between resolved and closed?
Between
Resolved and closed.
maybe there is a team manager or something that needs to close it to say that it's okay. Yeah. So it's different than a review. You see, depends on how you use it. You can define this yourself actually within the team.
To restructure it.
Sorry.
The result state has like an option to restructure the product.
No, it depends on how you set up your workflow. Yeah. So if you want it to be that way, you set up your workflow so that it is. Yeah. We use open, of course. In progress, in review. We use resolved. Closed for us is more like get it out of the system so that we don't see it in our list. So it doesn't have any more meaning than that for us. So that depends on how the team organizes this. Okay, artifacts. What do you deliver of actual stuff in Scrum? First of all, we build a Scrum a product backlog. That's a list of all our issues, our user stories, tasks, and maybe subtasks on those tasks as well. So that's our product backlog. What we do when we start a sprint, we prioritize from the product backlog. We pick the issues that we want and put it in a sprint backlog. That's what we want to resolve during this 2-week sprint or 3-week sprint or yeah. And then we have an increment. Backlog, I think, is understandable, but an increment, anybody knows what that is in Scrum or Agile? You have an increment after the end of a sprint. That's the sum of all the issues that you have resolved. So that's actually both the sum of all your issues that you have resolved and the product, the working product that you have at that moment. That's the increment after sprint. And system documentation, if that's defined as a part of the system that is delivered. Often it is still. There are a lot of less documentation in Scrum, but still you have to do documentation, like code documentation. If you're contributing to open source systems, you have to be able to document the code that you're delivering to the system, to the project. Management tools. We have task boards. Typically, we have columns with the states that we can have, like open, in progress, in review. Sorry, open, in progress, in review, testing, and resolve, for example. And you can see that in Jira as well. You have this board in Jira where you can see your Scrum board. The same manner that you do with post-it notes. But many use these actual physical Scrum task boards as well, because they are tangible, they are easy to manipulate and relate to. You also have what's called a burn down chart. Anybody knows what a burn down chart is?
It's your intended progress of the days.
Yes. The straight line is the intended progress. And this more, not so straight line, is the actual job that you have done, the issues that you have resolved. If you have estimated these issues, the work still to be done in the sprint will be decremented accordingly to what issue you have resolved. If you add issues, typically you see that you shouldn't do that during a sprint. But if you add issues, you will see that your burn down chart is rising. We'll use Jira as a project management tool. There's a Scrum task board there. We have a burn down chart and we have an issue workflow. We will be using Jira in this project. We have you have the address to the Jira server here, dev.imt.hig.no/tracker. I will provide you with these slides, so you will have them. You will have the links. And we will have a project wiki in Confluence. The course homepage is on Atlassian Confluence server, and you should create the project team homepages on the same server under the teams pages. This is the homepage of the Confluence wiki. Here we have a Teams subpage, and here you have to create your team wiki page. Okay, I have a little less time than I thought to give you a little demo of Jira. So you have to read up on Jira yourself as well, and try to get familiar with it as soon as you get access. Okay. Some of you have used Jira before, so that's good for the groups that you're on. But let's look a little bit into Jira. Confluence is quite, I would say, easy. It's easy to use and quite intuitive. So I won't use much time on Confluence. But let's look at Jira. Yes. First of all, we have the project here listed. You can look at one of the projects that I run last year. Let's see. Google Analytics cross-account data. Welcome to your project. So here you have your issues. Here you can administrate how you use your issues. The agile methodologies. We will set this many of these things up for you. For example, the workflow will be quite the same for all the teams. Maybe you want to do adjustments, then you just say so to me, and I'll try to adjust it accordingly. Let's see. The main thing here is what we find on the more with a larger screen. It won't say more here, but it will say capture and agile. On agile, because there we can look at our boards. Here we can administrate our sprints, and we can look at the sprint reports and so on. Google Analytics cross-account data. There are no active sprints. But if I click on plan here, we have a product backlog. there are few issues still to remain to do on this project, so that's good. GADC 113, for example. That's one issue. It's hopeless with this small screen, but we'll try to make it anyway. On an issue, we can see that this issue is open. You see? And it's not related to any epic. What kind of issue is it? Let's look into it. It's kind of slow as well. Yeah, this is a bug. It's classified as a bug with major prioritization. And it's still unresolved. Typically what we do, I won't do it now then, but what we do before a sprint, we create a sprint. And when we create a sprint, we start to pick issues from our backlog. That means that GADC 113, for example, we want to prioritize that. GADC 5 maybe, which is a user story. Here you see an example of a user story as well. As an account administrator, I want to set up and authorize several GA users. That means Google Analytics, if you ever heard about Google Analytics, with multiple GA accounts from which data is collected so that I can collect and consolidate data from several sources. So that's an example of a user story. Let's see if it has subtasks as well. I'll look into it. This is hopeless. It's hopeless with the resolution of the projector. Sorry about that. Yeah, I typically look at the subtasks here. Yeah, no subtasks. Here we can create subtasks, you see. If you want to break it down to more manageable, smaller manageable tasks. And we can also classify things as tasks and make even a smaller granularity there as well, and break that into subtasks as well. So you have user stories with tasks and subtasks, you see. Okay, it's quite easy both to create new issues in your sprint backlog and in your product backlog. First of all, in the sprint backlog, you can click on create issue to add an issue there. The same thing goes for the product backlog, create issue. Now I created the issue test. I classified it as a bug. That was not intentional, but I did. We see that we can choose what kind of classification we want on the issue there. Maybe that's an issue that I want into the sprint as well. And we may estimate the issue to see how much work we have left. Just give me 2 minutes and I'll be finished. Sorry. Maybe 45 minutes I need for that. That's an estimate. Yes. We have two types of estimation. First of all, we have estimation in working hours, or you can use estimation in story points. Have you tried story points? Look into story points if you're interested in using that for your project. That's not a type related to time. It's more a type related to an estimation of how much work you think it will be without knowing how much time you will use. So by using story points in a larger scale, maybe for a year or so, you know more or less how many story points the completion of a module will be at any time. So it's more free from time than time estimation is. Okay, I don't have time to show you more from Jira. We also are able to look at the burn down charts and so on in Jira. Try to look into it and then get familiar with Jira during the next 2 weeks. Okay. As I said, I will send you an email with more instructions on what to do until the next time. Yes. Thank you for today. And remember that your supervisors are familiar with Jira and Confluence, so they can also give you hints on how to do things there. Have a nice weekend then. Yeah. Yeah.